In this lesson, we're going to look at the training charts that are used by the Coast Guard and schools that offer Coast Guard approved classes when it comes to the navigation plotting problems and exams. These are the training charts used in the OUPV and the 100-ton master classes and examinations, again for the navigation plotting portion. We'll look at general chart problems, and that is we'll look at the chart and determine the answer based on information we find on the chart. Then sometimes we're going to have to look up the answer in chart 1, so there's some chart 1 problems. And then sometimes we're going to get the information to answer the question from the Coast Pilot, so there's a couple of Coast Pilot problems. Again, go ahead and download the sample questions, which will give you additional questions after this lesson is over. This is the first training chart we're going to talk about. This is the training chart that covers the Chesapeake Bay entrance, and it's training chart 12221. Let's go ahead and take a look at the title block. I'll just zoom in there. And you can see Chesapeake Bay entrance is the name of the chart. Soundings are in feet at mean low water. And again, in the lower left corner, we can see that it's the training chart TR 12221. The next training chart we'll take a look at is the Block Island Sound training chart. And let's go ahead and zoom in on the title block there. And you can see Block Island Sound and approaches. And the training chart number is 13205. All these training charts are not to be used for navigation, just using for the Coast Guard questions and study purposes. Last chart we're going to take a look at is the Long Island Sound, the eastern part. And again, that's a training chart. We'll zoom in on the title, Long Island Sound, eastern part, and this has a training chart number of 12354. These electronic chart viewers and all the reference material is available via links in the comment section of the YouTube page. Let's take a look at a couple of the general chart questions in reference to the training chart for the Chesapeake Bay entrance. Again, this is training chart 12221, the training chart. And again, we can see that that is the training chart. Down on the lower right hand corner, you see the chart number, and right here, as you can see, it's 12221, and then TR means training chart. And again, we can look at the title block, and we can see right there, this is the Chesapeake Bay entrance chart. And we're going to answer the first couple of questions using this training chart. So let's see, we're going to need the training chart itself. We may need the light list, and the appropriate light list will be volume 2. Coast Pilot, and the appropriate one will be volume 3. And we may also need chart number 1. And there are links to all the references that you'll need to answer these questions in the comment sections below. Keep in mind the publications that you're going to use when you take your Coast Guard exam will be the 1983 publications. That is, the light list, Coast Pilots, tide tables, and current tables will all reference the 1983 tables and publications. And the Coast Guard does that so that if the publication changes, they don't have to go back and change the answers and the questions that they are giving you. Keep in mind the publications I've given you are adequate to answer these sample questions. So let's take a look at the first question. It says the soundings on this chart are measured in, and then we have choices: feet, yards, fathoms, and meters. And there's a couple places to find that information on the chart. Let's take a look at a few. Title block of the chart, again, Chesapeake Bay entrance, and we read down below, it says soundings in feet, and specifically soundings in feet at mean lower low water. Again, there's a couple other places you can see it's printed down here in the margins in red. Obviously, we would go ahead and pick answer A, so the soundings in this chart are measured in feet. Let's take a look at the next question, question number 2. What are the bottom characteristics of Nautilus Shoal? And it gives us a latitude and longitude. If we're not familiar with where Nautilus Shoal is located, then we'll go ahead and use those latitude and longitude to figure out where that is. And then we're going to have to read what the bottom type is, and we may have to actually look that up in chart number 1 if we're not familiar with the abbreviation. So we'll take a look at the training chart. And again, the first thing we need to do is find Nautilus Shoal, and it gives us the latitude and longitude if we're not too familiar with where it's located. It gives us a 37 degrees and 3 minutes north, so 37 degrees, 1, 2, 3 minutes north. So it's going to be on this latitude here coming across. And it gives us a longitude of 75 degrees and 56-minute west. So reading up from the bottom, I here have my 75 degrees here, and I have to go all the way over to 56, 50, 55, 56. So it'll be here coming up on that longitude up to the latitude we had mentioned. And here we go, Nautilus Shoals. I'll go ahead and zoom in on that. So here it is. You can see Nautilus Shoals. And it's asking us what the bottom type is. So we're trying to read the bottom type off of the chart. And right above here, right above the Nautilus Shoals, I see looks like FNEGY. FNEGY. So if we're not familiar with that abbreviation is, where do we find that information? We find that in chart 1. So let's take a look at chart 1. Now there's a couple of places to find the information within chart 1. I'm going to go ahead and use the index of abbreviations. And again, on page 107, I go down to the third line and I see FNE, which stands for fine. Next thing we have to look up is GY, and again, still on page 107 within the same index, I can see that GY stands for gray. And the last thing I need to look up is the S, and you can see on page 110 I see that S stands for sand. So again, that would be fine gray sand, which was one of our choices. So we would go back to question 2, and we would go ahead and pick Charlie, fine gray sand. We'll go ahead and work through the rest of these problems. Again, if you've downloaded the question, sample questions, there's a couple to work through for this chart and also for the Block Island Sound chart, which again you can also get to via the links that are in the comment section. Let's try 2 more problems. For these problems, we're going to use the Block Island Sound training chart and the reference material associated with the Block Island Sound training chart. The first question you can see is going to be a general chart question, and it reads, the soundings on this chart are measured in, and it gives feet, yards, meters, and fathoms. So again, if we look at the training chart, we'll be able to determine what the sounding datum is and answer the question. The second question you can see is a Coast Pilot style question. It says Block Island Sound is, and it's blank, and we're trying to answer the question based on the description. You can tell that's typically a little bit more information that's typically presented on a chart. So where do we get additional information that is not presented on a chart? We get that in the Coast Pilot. So we're going to look up on the Coast Pilot to answer that question. To answer the first question, we're going to need the training chart for Block Island Sound. And again, you can find a link to an electronic version of this chart in the comments section below. So let's pull up the chart, and the first thing we're going to look for is the chart title block. And again, we can see this is the Block Island Sound and approaches. We can see that the soundings are measured in feet at mean lower low water. If we scroll to the left, we can see that again this is the 13205 training chart. We see also that the soundings are measured in feet in one of the location there in red, soundings measured in feet. And as always with all these training charts, they are for instructional purposes only. That is answering the Coast Guard questions and for studying for navigation plotting. So we would answer the first question, that is the soundings on this chart are measured in and it's blank, and we would answer that with feet, so that would be choice A. The next question we'll take a look at is number 3. It says Block Island is, and then it's blank, and it gives you some descriptions that are listed in choices A through D. Typically, this kind of level of description is not located on the chart, but let's go ahead and take a look at the chart and see what we can find. Here's a zoom in of Block Island, and you can see it's labeled Block Island, and we're looking for descriptive information on the chart. And typically you don't find very detailed descriptive information about land masses and structures on the chart itself, which should be an indication that maybe there's another location to find this information. And there is. The chart can't contain all the descriptive information that we're going to need for navigating a particular area. Additional information is provided in the Coast Pilot, and specifically Coast Pilot Volume 2 for the area that we're operating on this nautical chart. Usually the quickest way to find something in the Coast Pilot is just look it up in the index. So turn back to the index, and you can see that the index starts on page 439, and then we look down for Block Island. There we go, we find it right there, Block Island, and we can see that more additional descriptive information is going to be provided on page 259. So we turn to page 259 and we find the description about Block Island, and there it goes. It says Block Island, 5 miles long, is hilly with elevations up to 200 feet. That sounds a lot like one of the choices were provided. Going back to question number 3, the question was Block Island is, and it was blank, and we read down the choices, and it looks like Charlie, or C, hilly with elevations up to 200 feet is exactly what we found in the Coast Pilot. In this lesson, we looked at the training charts typically used in operator uninspected passenger vessel and the 100-ton master course of instruction for the navigation plotting exam. We looked at general chart problems, and that is, by looking at the chart, we can answer the questions, and we also looked at the types of questions that you would also need chart number 1 or the Coast Pilot to get the correct answer. I hope this free online lesson was valuable, and good luck studying for your Coast Guard exam. If you have any questions, please email National Seafarers Academy at info@natc.com. This is the first video in a series of how to do the navigation plotting problems that are associated with the OUPV and the 100-ton master curriculum. So please stand by for additional videos linked to this channel.